This is a financial dashboard, your entire business at a glance. 8 core metrics, any period you choose compared to last month, last year, or even your budget. And if you work in finance and accounting, knowing how to build this will make you the go-to person on your team. So grab your Excel file, because in this video, we're gonna build it together. Let's begin. All right, now before we dive in, let me give you the lay of the land. See, in computer programming, there's a concept of front end and back end. The front end is everything you see and interact with. Back end is the engine that makes it all work. It's the same thing with this dashboard. On the front end, you've got the KPI boxes that highlight your key metrics, the drop downs that let you change periods, and the check boxes that allow you to compare against different periods or your budget, and formatting that makes the results pop. On the back end, all this connects to a data table, a date table, and dedicated drivers and budget tabs. Those tabs dynamically power the dashboards you just saw. And by the way, if you don't want to build all this from scratch, you can grab the finished version entirely for free by downloading our Excel add-in, Model Wiz. And I'll show you how you can even get it connected to your QuickBooks Online data in just a few minutes. So in this video, we're going to be building both the front end and the back end together, step by step. So let's start with designing. Now, this is actually the part most people overlook, but it's arguably the most important. Because here's the truth. If your dashboard is cluttered or hard to read, the insights get lost. But if it's designed well, the right numbers jump out instantly and drive better decisions. One of my favorite tips is to keep an album of dashboards you like. Screenshots, templates, even designs from outside of finance. That way, when you build your own, you've always got inspiration to pull from. Now, when it comes to actually designing, think about 3 buckets. First, the content. You want just the right amount of data, enough to give a full picture, but not so much that it overwhelms or causes fatigue. Second, layout. The shape and placement of your KPI boxes, titles, and subheadings. The composition here really matters. And third, the style. Your color scheme, your fonts, and the consistency across the whole dashboard. Get these 3 right, and you're not just building a dashboard, you're building a tool people will actually use. Now let's start putting the pieces together. Before we connect the back end, I'm gonna mock up everything that's going to go on this first tab. That's actually another really popular thing in computer programming. You build the front end, and then you make it dynamic with real information and functionality. Now, I'm gonna speed up the creation of this dashboard, but first, let me give you the quick specs I'll be using. Here are the column widths and merge cells I set up for the layout. Pause here if you want to copy them. Next, the colors. These are the exact shades I'm using across the KPI boxes and background. Consistency is what makes the dashboard pop. And here are the fonts and sizes. I like to keep the titles bold and readable with smaller, lighter text for subheadings. Again, pause if you want to grab these. Okay, now let me quickly build this all out. All right, so let's start by first just taking these columns and making them a 1.5 width. And then we'll take all these other columns and we're gonna make that a 6 width. All right, now I'm just gonna write out the text everywhere. All right, now let's start mocking up just one of the KPI boxes. I'm gonna do just one box and then we'll copy it to all the others. All right, now I'm gonna show you how to populate these triangles in a bit, but for now, let's just populate this section. Okay, now let's start merging our cells. Now we'll give our KPI box an outline, and we'll give this top section an outline as well. And now let's change the font for everything over here to Roboto. And we'll start with a font size of 9. Let's now apply some bolding, and let's change the size of our text. And now let's adjust alignment. And let's give each of these some breathing room. And now let's introduce some color. And we'll change the font color. And these are inputs, so I'll make this blue. Let's also insert our checkboxes. And we'll make that blue as well. And this is going to be a gray. And we're going to line that right. And let's insert our logo. And we'll make all of this white. So a little more breathing room here. And we'll middle align this section. And let's change the border color now. And now I could simply take my data and just copy and paste it as such. And we'll do that as well. So now when I click on view and then grid lines, already this is starting to look a lot like our dashboard. let's just group this. And now we're set. And now the last thing I'm gonna do is just mock up this data over here, which is gonna power our formulas. Now don't worry if we're going too fast. We're gonna do all this actually dynamically in just a little bit. And there we have it. With the layout, colors, and fonts locked in, the structure is ready. Now let's start powering it with formulas. And if you'd rather skip the manual build and connect QuickBooks Online automatically, watch this. So here's Model Wiz, our Excel add-in, and you can get it from the App Store or from modelwiz.com. And I'll just click this button to instantly fetch my QuickBooks Online data, reshape it, and bring in the data into my dashboard. And this is really just the start. You can download full 3-statement financial models tied to your data, or export it to PDF, or even take advantage of a library of dashboards. And you can try it today, completely free at modelwiz.com. All right, now let's kick off our formulas. Now to power this dashboard, there really are just 3 formulas that you need to know, starting with SUMIFS. And the syntax is really simple. You point to the range you want to sum, then give it the criteria ranges and the criteria values. So here, I'm pulling in values directly from the drivers tab, filtering by account and by date. That's what gives us things like revenue, COGS, and OPEX. Here, let me show you. All right, so to get started, I'm gonna write equals SUMIFS, and then I'm gonna go to my drivers range. And because I'm pulling in my revenue, I'm just gonna take everything on row 10, and I'll hit F4 to lock the columns. Now I have 2 conditions. The first condition is that my start dates is greater than my start date. So I'll select these values here. I'll hit F4. I'll then hit a comma. Now, when you're doing greater than or equal to, it's important to wrap it around these quotation marks and put an ampersand. And I am going to then point to my start date. Now I want this to be locked, so I'll just hit F4. Now I just need to do the same thing for the end date. And this time with quotations again, it's going to be less than or equal to the end date. I'll close the parentheses and I'll hit enter. Perfect. And now to get the prior period, watch how easy this is. I could just copy and paste. And when I hit F2, I could just drag this for the prior period. And I'll do the same thing for the prior year. Just drag that down. And let's just expand this. And then budget, it's really the same thing as my function for current, only instead of drivers, I'm going to change that to budget. Watch how easy this is if I press Control H. And I'll just replace drivers with budget like this and hit replace. Perfect. It was able to now pull in the value, and that's our SUMIFS. Next up, we have the variance. And all variance is the difference between 2 values. Subtract 1 from the other for the delta. But to calculate percent variance, it's a bit trickier than just dividing the delta by the initial value. We need to do 2 things. First, you need to wrap around an if-error function so it doesn't blow up when there's a 0 in the denominator. But here's what most people miss. You also need to wrap the denominator with the absolute function, because dividing a negative variance by a negative value will return a positive, confusing your readers into thinking this is a positive variance when in reality it's not. And once you've got the values, the next step is easy. Just link them to the dashboard with a simple reference. I'll also wrap those references in an if statement, so they only appear if the corresponding checkbox is checked. And that's it. With SUMIFS, variances, and some simple references, you've got all the formulas you need to power this dashboard. But what about getting these dynamic dates? All right. So now we're going to kick it up a notch. This is where you graduate from everyday Excel user to total pro. And as a refresher, I've got a drop down here with periods I set up using data validation. The goal is simple. Whenever I pick a period, the values in this table update automatically. But before we link it up, let's populate this date table. Now, my forecast has a latest month of actuals. This is the last reconcile period from my accounting software. To make this easy, I'm going to create a named range for it so I can reference it more easily in the future. Next, the date functions. There really are only 5 that you need to know here, and they're all pretty simple. The first is EOMONTH. Give it a date, tell it how many months forward or back you want to go, and it does the rest. For quarters, we'll use 4 more: year, month, date, and round up. Year and month extract parts of a date. Date lets us rebuild an entire date dynamically, and round up helps us map months into the correct quarter start and end. quarters always begin on fixed dates. So January 1st, April 1st, July 1st, October 1st, or whatever fiscal year your company uses. Now for the prior period. The trick is to figure out how many months the current period spans, then shift that entire range back with EOMONTH. That gives us both the prior period start and end, like this. Now for the prior year, it's actually really simple. Just use the eDate function to jump back 12 months from your start and end date. Same day, 1 year earlier. All right, so now that I have my dates, I'm gonna use a simple lookup to bring that into my dashboard. Now you can use XLOOKUP, though my personal favorite is index with XMATCH. Let me show you how that works. All right, so here's my period selected, and I then have hard-coded values for all these dates. This is gonna be what I wanna replace with our index XMatch function. And those are gonna be coming from over here, where the period is gonna be matched as such. So let's write out that formula. I'm gonna write equals index, and this is gonna be what I want returned. So I want the start date for whatever is selected here. And that is this start date column. And I'll just select all this here, and notice how it actually changed the syntax. It's because I converted this to an Excel table. All right, so I want to pull in that information, and I want to do an XMatch wherever our lookup value, which is going to be the actual report period, is matched to this params column X such. All right, now let me close the XMatch and the index and hit enter. And check it out, that just worked. So if I just copy this over to the right, and instead of this saying start date, I change it to the column name, which is end date, this should update. Cool, and I could do the same thing for the prior period by just copying this down, only instead of it being start date and end date, I want that to be prior period start, prior period end. Well, that's really simple. I could actually just change start date to prior period start. And then I'll do the same thing for this, where instead of it saying end date, I can just say prior period end. Perfect. Now this works, so I'm gonna do the same thing really quickly for prior year. And budget's always gonna be the same thing as our current. So I'll just make those up. Awesome, now here's the ultimate test. If I change this drop down to, let's say, last month, it looks like everything gets updated, and the same thing if I do this quarter or even this year, looks like everything is updated automatically. And that's it. Now, whenever you change the dropdown, the entire dashboard responds dynamically with the correct dates. Now, with the dates locked in, the engine is built. We just got one thing left. It's time to style these numbers. All right, so in our last section, I told you that we got you from everyday Excel user to expert Excel user. Well, in this section, we're gonna pretty much make you a black belt, because it's rare to find people who realize just how flexible Excel styling features are. And it took me years and years to learn that. And I'm excited to break it down for you in this chapter. And let's kick things off with what's known as custom formatting. See these arrows here? There's symbols that automatically populate depending on whether the value is a positive or a negative. To set this up, open the Format Cells dialog box by either clicking this button or hitting Control-1 and then going to Custom. Now we're going to define how the value should appear. Now the beauty of custom formatting is that you're not changing the underlying value in the cell. You're just changing how it looks. Now before the first semicolon is the format for how positive values will appear. After that is the format for negative, and after that is how it appears if it's a 0. For us, we want an upward triangle if it's positive and a downward triangle if it's negative. So just tap on Alt on your keyboard and then go to your keypad over here and hit 3-0 for the upward triangle. To get the downward triangle, again, hold down Alt and this time hit 3 and 1. Now, that's the basics, but we can go much further. Next is custom formatting's more popular cousin, conditional formatting. We want income increasing or expenses decreasing to show as green, while the opposite show as red. Conditional formatting makes that really easy. You can write rules like highlight if greater than 0 and so much more. Here, let me show you. Okay, so the idea is pretty simple. I want to highlight in green if the value is greater than 0. For a good account like revenue, and in red if it's less than 0. When I get to my cost of goods sold and expenses, I'm gonna wanna flip those rules. Now, it's really easy to just do this naturally if you go to conditional formatting and just click on greater than. I can then just click 0 and set this. So green formatting and click OK. Now this works. I could do the opposite for red, but it's actually a little bit trickier than that. See, I haven't gotten to this part in the video yet, but soon we're gonna be introducing the text function. And this function is going to allow us to see some of our values in millions or thousands or percentages, all dynamically with our formula. And this is technically a text, so Excel isn't going to recognize this. But it gives me the opportunity to teach you one of my favorite tricks when it comes to conditional formatting. See, many people think that they can only change the format with conditional formatting for the exact cell that they're in. Well, you could actually point to other cells and change the value of your current cell with an entirely custom rule. And when I understood this, it really made my head explode. So watch how simple this is. I have this other table over here that just links to the values that you see over here. So I want to try to make these say true or false based off of the condition that I'm going to feed into my conditional formatting formula. And I want this to be all based off of the value over here, because this is an actual number value that we just did earlier with custom formatting. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to say if this is greater than 0. Now I'm going to lock the column because I want to apply this to all the rows here, and I don't want the column to move. And if I just copy this now across like this, you'll see that all these are saying true. Now, if I just change this, let's say to a -25484, well, now this whole line should be false. And as you can see, because it's referencing D20, it's picking that up correctly. So as long as I just take now this formula in the very first top left cell and make that my formula for this entire range, all the values will update accordingly. These two values will update based off of this. These two values will update based off of this. And these two values will update based off of that. Let me show you. So I'm going to take this formula here and I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to select this whole range. Under Home, Conditional Formatting, I'm going to create a new rule. And this time it is going to be a formula. I'll copy and paste it over there. And the formula, if this is true, is that it should be this green. Now, looks like it's working, but while I'm here, why don't I actually duplicate that rule? And we can delete this old one. And when I duplicate this time, I'm going to edit it to say less than 0. And instead of it being green, I'll change to this red. And I'll click OK. Now let's apply it. And there you go. So even though this is a text that we're going to change soon, it's not really a number. Excel is determining the information based off of this cell as such. And we can now just copy and paste the formatting to these other boxes. And you just need to click Manage Rules. And instead of it referring to D19, we could just edit it to refer to J. And this time it's going to be greater than 0 because it's a cost of goods sold. And I could flip it over here to say J19 less than 0. And there we go. These are all positive values, which are highlighting as red because they're bad. And if I just change this, let's say to a -1, then it goes down and that's actually good. So now I know how to work with custom formulas with conditional formatting. And now for the most powerful trick, formatting values in millions, thousands, or percentages depending on what the number is. So we want the abbreviations to change dynamically as the values change. And we're going to revisit custom formatting to do that. But this time, we're also going to use the text function directly inside our cell. First, look at this table. It shows examples of how values could display under different styles. If it's under 100,000, show it with commas. Between 100,000 and a million, show it with a K. In the millions, add an M. For percentages, add this percentage sign. We can even design variance versions so that it shows a plus or a minus sign dynamically. To power this, we're going to use the switch function. So instead of stacking a nested if function, switch makes it really clean. Point to a condition and then define the values for each scenario. Let's see what that looks like in action. All right, so the first thing I'm going to write is equals switch. And now I'm being asked for my expression. And that is really whenever the condition is true. Now I'm going to point to our value, and I don't really want the condition changing if it's positive or negative. It really just depends on how big that number is. So I'm going to wrap that around the absolute. Perfect. So now we need to start writing our conditions. I'm going to hit Alt and then Enter just to come to another line and give us some more breathing room. So I wrote out all of my conditions and the corresponding formats that I want in this notepad. So if it's less than 1, I want it to return the formatting for percentage like you see here. If it is less than 100,000, then I want it to return just a common number. If it's less than a million, return 1,000 with a K. And if it's millions, return in the millions with this M. And you can take a screenshot of this if you want as we build it out together. So I'm gonna actually just take this over here and I'm gonna copy and paste that as such. So I'm gonna say if the absolute was less than 1, return this percentage. And I'm gonna do that again for the absolute value here. Now you can use a let function to speed this up. And now I'm going to go to my next condition for a common number. And I'm just going to speed this up as I do that for all these conditions. Okay, now finally, I'm just gonna put millions as my catch-all, and technically, it could keep going for billions, but I don't think we're gonna run into that with this data set. Now I'll just close the parentheses and hit enter, and looks like this worked. So let me just see if I continue pasting this down. All right, so we got percentage updating automatically here. This is updating for thousands, and this is updating for millions. Looks like it's working. And now finally, to get these to show through our text, we'll wrap these formulas around the text function. The syntax in the text function is really simple. You first put the value, then after the first comma, the format. Point to the number, comma, then the formatting code that we just created, like this. Okay, so instead of this referring to AB16, I'm gonna put the text function before it. I already have my value. I just need to get the actual format text. And that's this cell over here that we already populated. And it looks like it formatted this pretty well. Okay, so now I'm just gonna copy this to the other cells to see if that works. And instead of 16, I'll just point this to row 17 because all of my metrics go from top down, like you see over here. And I'm just gonna speed up as I do that real quick. Okay, now it looks like this is working. So this is showing in K and minus K, and then we even have 1.2 million as such. Well done. And just like that, the dashboard is not only accurate, but dynamic and beautifully styled. Now, we covered a lot in this video, so I want to do a really quick refresher. First, we separated the front end from the back end, a really popular concept in computer programming that'll help us in designing our dashboards. And speaking of designing, we made our dashboards beautiful by first mocking it up with just the front end. We covered the content, the style, the colors, and the composition. We then started linking up our data using key functions such as the SUMIFS to pull in the data from the drivers tab as well as the budget tab. In order to get this toggle to allow us to change our dates, we used a bunch of different date functions to populate this date table. We then used a simple lookup function in order to pull up the relevant start and end date for each of our periods. And then in our last section, we added some really cool dynamic styles using both custom formatting as well as conditional formatting. And if you made it this far, give yourself a huge pat on the back. I'm impressed, seriously. But don't stop there, because there's so much more that you can do to add value to your career in finance and accounting. And one of the biggest value adds is learning how to build a 3-statement model. And lucky for you, I cover that entirely in this video right over here. So go ahead and click that link. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe, and let me know what your favorite part was in the comments. All those things really help our channel. I'm Josh, your CFO guy, and I'll catch you in the next one.